Episode 2. The cool breeze of late autumn became damp as it wafted across Jingfan's face. It started to rain, and Jingfan unconsciously started to shiver from the cold. The autumn mood became more apparent as it appeared to grow colder and colder with every rain, at a rate that showed no signs of slowing down. The clock on the wall had already passed 4 o'clock, and it was just a little longer until sunrise. It was looking like another night of rough sleep. During an autumn as cold as this, what could she do to occupy her aching heart? To avoid making anyone worry, Jingfan decided to return to the bedroom while Koichi was still sleeping. Jingfan was well aware that her love with Koichi was already in the distant past. Or at least, that's what she thought. But she did not want to distance herself from him any more than they already had. Regardless of how Koichi felt, Jingfan would not be able to endure the loneliness of separating from him. Since getting married, Jingfan lost the confidence to even speak. Little by little, she became unable to believe in herself anymore. Jingfan got up again an hour later, this time to make breakfast. Since getting married, Jingfan had been doing a lot of the housework by herself. There were dim clouds outside and a light rain was still falling from the gray sky. The moist morning air turned to mist, which blurred the shapes of people rushing through the streets in the fog. Koichi finally opened his eyes. He entered the living room with morning eyes, opened the curtains, and stared outside. Oh, it's raining. There's been so much rain this year. He had already progressed into the bathroom before Jingfan could let out a reply. She then heard the loud sound of rushing water, to which her eyebrows tensed as she found the shower to be much noisier than the rain outside. Still wet from the shower, Koichi approached her from the side. He hesitated a bit as he watched her make breakfast with a bit of a gloomy look on her face. Then, just as Jingfan had expected, he proceeded to the study without saying anything. When did things start growing so cold between them to the point where neither of them could even find words to exchange with each other? Just like the steam from after a shower, the fun times they shared in the past had faded away in the blink of an eye as if they had never even existed. Time flies by fast, and the world is always changing. Of course, everyone knows that yesterday's pools are today's rapids, but Jingfan found that having to adapt to such a change had been incredibly taxing on her feelings. But Jingfan was perfectly fine. She had experienced things painful enough to cause chest aches, but now she possessed a mental state in which she could reduce her own stress and learn to ignore it. It was an extraordinarily long road to get to this point, but Jingfan had grown accustomed to situations like this. Breakfast is ready. Jingfan softly called to Koichi as he sat in front of the computer. Okay, he replied in a dry voice. This was the first conversation of the morning in which they were exchanging words with each other, but it quickly came to a halt without even lasting a minute. Jingfan sat alone at the table, but she lacked the appetite to eat the meal she had spent over an hour to prepare. The food on each dish lined up before her continued to grow colder and colder from the lonely air circulating through the room. Koichi finally appeared from across the table. He, just like Jingfan, slowly scooped food into his mouth and slowly chewed without making any other sounds. There was a delicious smell floating around, but neither of them seemed to be enjoying the flavor. This had been the state of their relationship recently, but neither of them understood why it had reached this point. I think I want to look for a job, Jingfan announced, breaking the silence. A job? Koichi asked in confirmation as his hands ceased scooping food. Yeah, I want to work. It's already been 3 months since finishing grad school, and I don't think finding a job will be that difficult as long as I keep my expectations low. We made a promise before we got married, right? That I wouldn't be forced to live a life locked up in the house, cut off from society, spending all my time surrounded by groceries and seasonings. I guess we did promise, Koichi agreed as he put down his chopsticks and looked at her with empty eyes. Jingfan, I get it. I get that you don't particularly enjoy living in Japan, he continued. That's not it. It's not that I don't enjoy it, it's just that I'm not used to it. I'm still not used to the role of being a wife, and in particular, your wife. Before we got married, I thought it would be enough to give each other all of our love. But after actually getting married, I slowly realized that marriage is not just about two people. There's a lot of complicated stuff tied into it, Jingfan said with a dreary sigh. I don't know whether or not marriage is really as complicated as you say, but I've also noticed that you've gradually stopped smiling. You've also become quieter. Did you think I hadn't noticed? I'm your husband, so I know these things. I know when you're having fun, I know when you're not having fun, and sometimes I know even more than you do. I understand that you're incredibly lonely being all by yourself in this house. But as soon as I can, I'm going to change this and make more time to spend with you. If you really want to find a job that badly, I won't stop you. But if you can, could you maybe wait a little longer? For starters, going out and finding a job is not something you should decide on your own. I think you need to ask the family, especially my mother, what they think. Even if I'm on your side, it might take some time to persuade my mother. Jingfan expected this response. After hearing this, Jingfan did not say anything. Just as Koichi said, even if he was in agreement, his mother, her mother-in-law, would never allow it. Merely the thought of Kimio's standoffish attitude and sour face sent a chill down Jingfan's spine. There was no doubt that Kimio would object. As one of the nation's top corporations, the famed Mizuno Group not only operated foreign language schools, but also engaged in a wide variety of business practices, including corporate training, online business, and IT development. As a wife from such a corporation with a fortune of tens of billions of yen, stepping outside to work as an ordinary citizen would be an unforgivable act of rebellion according to this high-class family's old way of thinking. After breakfast, Jingfan walked with Koichi to the car and saw him off as always. She leaned heavily against the door, watching him drive off from behind as the car spouted a black cloud of smoke. The drizzling autumn rain picked up and became a misty curtain of water, covering everything in sight. The dreary hours after that elapsed without a sound. On days like this, ever since she had randomly spotted that TV station newscaster recruitment advertisement in the newspaper, passion for her dream that had been slowly dying out once again started burning in her chest. That night, Jingfan waited for Koichi until 1 o'clock in the morning. He made a surprising face for a moment when he saw Jingfan sitting on the couch. You haven't gone to bed yet? We talked about this before, didn't we? You don't need to wait for me when I come home late. Your body will give out if you keep waiting this long. There's something I want to talk to you about, she whispered, lifting her head. Koichi began loosening his tie. If it's not urgent, can it wait till tomorrow? I'm so tired I could fall over right now. I was in a meeting non-stop from 5 o'clock. It was miserable. My ears are still ringing even now. Let's talk later. It's not that urgent, is it? He yawned, rubbing his tired eyes. He really was busy. Koichi is the successor of a large corporation. The work he must deal with is both complicated and massive in scale, and his meetings are up to the ceiling with mountains of documents and schedules. He does not have time to listen to Jingfan talk about her lonely feelings. Seeing the reflection of Koichi disappear from before the mirror, Jingfan remembered the poem. Gazing upon the lush willow trees on the roadside, she regrets encouraging her husband to achieve high social status. In her case, however, she never asked for him to build a high social status with a fortune making millions, nor had she wished for a luxurious lifestyle where she could spend as much money as she wanted. Nonetheless, Koichi was lucky to be born into a life abundant with wealth that ordinary people can only imagine. Perhaps only Koichi knows whether that is good fortune or misfortune, but Jingfan felt that her partner, regardless of whether he was happy or not, seemed constrained and somewhat miserable despite the prosperous life he was living. After harboring these thoughts, Jingfan decided to give up. Since the day she married Koichi, she should have prepared herself to walk through the rest of her life with her selfishness sealed away. Her husband, worn out from the workday, would never have time to lend his ear to listen to her sorrows at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he should not be expected to. This was the fate that she needed to accept from the moment she became a member of the Mizuno family. There was no other choice. She finally realized how naive she was for thinking he would be by her side forever. "You're not going to bed yet? I'm going to go ahead and go to bed. You should rest too. Tomorrow I'll definitely come home from work early, so don't get mad at me," Koichi pleaded. Jingfan did not answer, so he went into the bedroom by himself, not even noticing the tears on her face. Koichi had changed. The Koichi she knew in the past was passionate, thoughtful, and kind. He always understood her feelings while looking out for her in every aspect of her life. Jingfan cheered herself up by remembering the person he once was. She would never forget the fun days they spent together back then. But things were completely different now. How would things be in 10 years? And after that? What would eventually happen to their relationship? Rather than simply not thinking about it, it may have been more appropriate to say that Jingfan lacked the courage to think about it. Outside the window, the rain started to pour again. The sound of the rain pounding against the glass was a sound that strangely grated on her ears even on a quiet night like this. Jingfan dragged her tired legs to the balcony. Watching the water droplets fall onto the large leaves of the many Chinese phoenix trees planted in the garden, thoughts that she could not express in words welled up in her chest. She had never felt so powerless in her life. The rain tightly enwrapped her shivering body as she pondered the uncertainty of her future. Having to part ways with the happy memories from her past, which now seemed like a distant dream, would surely inflict overwhelming feelings of sadness to soak through every corner of her body. If she had known things would turn out like this, she would have avoided the situation from the start. Even though God allowed her to have such beautiful times in the past, why must she now suffer such loneliness? Is time something that should always be separated into the past and present? Why did it feel as though an ancient love story from thousands of years ago had resurfaced in the present, and what sort of tale did it want to tell? Can changes and transitions over the months and years simply erase everything in the past, just like the wind blows away fallen snow? Can their happy memory-filled relationship tear time into shreds? As written in a certain ballad, when you turn around, memories are temporary like snow. Flowers that were once brilliant eventually die out. Is this how their future would unravel? "I won't believe it. It's just a ballad, a make-believe, good-for-nothing fantasy," she whispered. The word fantasy caused Jingfan's heart to leap back into the past again. Since a while back, her memories had become her only source of support.